Good morning. Welcome to NewsWire here on SportsGrid. Okay, we've gotten through Super Wildcard Weekend. Thanks for being part of our little show today. For the next hour, we got you covered, recapping everything that happened there, but naturally we're talking a lot about the business of sports wagering. Mike Mazzeo is going to join us coming up from a Legal Sports Report in about 15, 20 minutes from now. We'll go over the very latest on sports betting across the country. In addition to that, Jacob Camenker joins us from the Sporting News. We'll take an early look at the lines for the games coming up this week. In addition, Brady Kannon joins us to go over the big golf tournament, probably the first big PGA Tour tournament, I would say, this upcoming weekend. So we'll preview that as well. But first, before we move forward, let's go back real quick yesterday. A couple of duds, I would say, played in Super Wildcard Weekend. Is that fair to say? The Pittsburgh Steelers really didn't keep things close outside of the point spread until the end of the game, but the Buffalo Bills essentially in the cold, in the snow, dominated the Pittsburgh Steelers for virtually 4 quarters as they end up moving on to the next round. The final 31-17 yesterday. Josh Allen put on a show again. He rushed for a 52-yard touchdown on the way to victory, as now the Buffalo Bills have moved on to the next round of the playoffs. In addition to that, we've got the Philadelphia Eagles taking on the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and the Eagles end up throttling the Buccaneers essentially in a game that was non-competitive from start to finish. Give the Steelers some credit. At least they showed up to play. The Eagles did not. 32-9 the final yesterday between Tampa Bay and Philadelphia. The Eagles will have some work to do this coming offseason. Seems like every team that lost in the playoffs, the fan base is going crazy on social media about firing the coach. Every single team firing the coach. I mean, the players do play the game, I guess. Nobody wants to hear that. Everybody wants to fire their coach. Meanwhile, great offensive lineman Jason Kelce, he tells the team he's going to retire. 36 years old, played center at such a high level for a long time. 6-time All-Pro, lately in front of Jalen Hurts, naturally playing in Super Bowls previous to this for Carson Wentz and Nick Foles, but Jason Kelce on the way out, it looks like, in the National Football League, barring some change of opinion. Now, the Atlanta Falcons are wasting no time trying to get Bill Belichick as their next head coach, it would appear. They've already interviewed him for the coaching vacancy. In addition to that, Jim Harbaugh interviewed yesterday with the Los Angeles Chargers. Mike Tomlin asked yesterday about his future with the Pittsburgh Steelers. In case you missed this press conference, as soon as they asked him, he left the press conference after the Buffalo Bills lost there. Also, linebacker Terrell Bernard was carted off the field during their win over the Steelers. He's been a very big piece of their defense, and we'll see if he can end up playing at all in the rest of the playoffs. So that's the latest in the National Football League. We'll go over all the games, point spreads, where they stand right now, coming up in just a few minutes. So stay on the grid with us for that. National Football League yesterday got a very big announcement for their upcoming draft. You're going to see a guy in a suit. His name is Caleb Williams, walking to the podium, probably with the first or the second or the third pick in the draft, probably the first. Caleb Williams headed to the draft. We knew this was going to happen, so not a big surprise. Jed Fish announced that he was leaving Arizona to go to Washington. Right now, it's looking like Brent Brennan is the possibility of their next head coach. He's the current coach of San Jose State. Also, their quarterback, Jaden DeLora, is transferring to Texas State. He played for Arizona and Washington State. And with Blake Corum entering the NFL for the Michigan Wolverines, their great running back, Donovan Edwards, is going to return in 2024. Remains to be seen who the quarterback will be there, and even if his head coach, Jim Harbaugh, will be back at Michigan. Still very much up in the air. In the NBA last night, the Golden State Warriors just can't seem to get right. They get Draymond Green back, but in his first game, they lose again, 116-107. It has not been a great season for the Warriors. Maybe that window is closing faster than we thought. Not the case for the 76ers. Joel Embiid, 41 points again last night, 30 or more points in 17 straight games, 124-115. Philadelphia ends up beating Houston last night. Shadon Sharpe is going to miss a couple of weeks for the Portland Trailblazers. They've had a tough season, not as bad as Detroit, but close. And also, the University of Connecticut back atop the top 25 poll for the first time. The Huskies are there since 2009. Also, the first time Gonzaga, by the way, not in the top 25 in almost a decade, 2016. Kind of crazy when you think about that. Okay, on the pitch in soccer, we had a big firing yesterday. Josie Marino who is with Roma, has been let go effective immediately in European soccer. He's as popular as it gets. Roma fell to 9th in the league after their loss this weekend. Meanwhile, Lionel Messi wins his third The Best FIFA award. He won over Erling Haaland and Kylian Mbappe. In baseball news, no free agency, no signings whatsoever. I don't know why. You tell me. But there was news yesterday as Dusty Baker, the former manager of course, the San Francisco Giants, Houston Astros won the World Series with them. He's returning to the Giants as a member of the front office. USA Today reported this yesterday. But as I said, no hot stove going on right now. Australian Open courtside bar proving controversial among some athletes. A few players in the tournament have spoken out about loud noises and a ruckus. And I guess they opened up this new bar for the Aussie Open to make things more fun and invigorating. But needless to say, that's not great in a sport like tennis where they're looking for as much quiet as possible. Now, one other interesting note here from one of the interviews that's going on in the National Football League. Wanted to mention this. This story that really we haven't talked all that much about, but I think it's going to gain some steam over the next couple of days with Jim Harbaugh. So Jim Harbaugh, in addition to interviewing with the Chargers and maybe even potentially some other teams, is also talking about the possibility of returning to Michigan in yet another, I mean, how many extensions this guy signed? Another extension, but some of the contract language apparently in a potential extension is protecting him from any sanctions that may come about for the University of Michigan with the sign stealing scandal or all the other stuff that's been going on there. So if Harbaugh does return, it looks like he's looking for some protection just in case something happens. Now, maybe that is influencing potentially his move to the National Football League, or just maybe this huge bag that Michigan's going to throw at him after winning the national championship still remains to be seen. But we got to keep an eye on this story throughout the week as well. Also, for those of you who have not downloaded the SportsGrid app, it's available for iOS and Android. Really great companion to those of you getting ready for the NFL games coming up this weekend, the divisional round, usually the best weekend of the NFL. It is coming up this weekend on Saturday and Sunday. So if you're watching on SportsGrid and you're watching the games, download the app. It'll tell you a lot about our company and all the shows that we have and all the latest points, spreads, odds, and everything else happening in college and professional sports. All right, let's do this. We'll take a quick time out here on NewsWire. Coming up next, our buddy Jacob Camenker joins us, courtesy of the Sporting News. Would you believe there are games this weekend where we have 3 games with point spreads of 6 or more? So are blowouts in store for the divisional round? We'll ask Jacob that coming up next. Also, Mike Mazzeo is in studio from Legal Sports Report talking about the business and the latest in sports wagering as well. We're off and running here on NewsWire.
Sat down with Nick Saban for a lengthy interview. You have spoken to Nick Saban multiple times throughout his career. How surprised were you?
I mean, he's not going anywhere, I don't believe. And at the end of the day, very surprised. Athletic department surprised. Talked to a few people, Alabama folks, late last night, early this morning. Very surprised. Didn't see it coming.
The Early Line. Only on SportsGrid.
Quarterback at quarterback. We're going to lay some juice. We're going to have some dog prices, and we're going to go right in the middle.
Because I don't know what they're doing. To me, they're in a complete rebuild, Kev.
Go run, run, run. That's where overbackers on this 51.5 shot.
So right now, we saw a little bit more over money, but it's hovering right around.
The winner of this game will be the division favorite.
I don't care if they win, because all we care about is the money, baby, the money.
Pro Football Today. It's smarter to be on SportsGrid. The Bostonian versus the Book.
This is one of the hardest jobs in all of football. You are replacing Bear Bryant. You are replacing Nick Saban. You are replacing guys who won national championships, and they still wanted him out. They still wanted him gone.
Mike Shula,
Mike Shula was a disaster. Dubos was a disaster.
Gene Stallings.
That's what I mean. They ran him out. He won a national championship, and they ran Gene Stallings out.
The Bostonian versus the Book.
Good move By the Clippers, and obviously, folks, they have Tyronn Lue, who I think is one of the best coaches in the league. And I'll say this right now, folks, the way they're playing, I know Minnesota's in first. I know Oklahoma City's been great. I know Denver's been fantastic. But the team I'm thinking right now that could actually come out of the West, if they stay healthy, and he keeps playing like that, it's Kawhi Leonard and the Clippers.
Betting above the rim, only on SportsGrid.
What did you think when you saw Lawrence on 3rd and 4th down, those 2 plays?
When you have a meltdown like the Jaguars have, the clear favorite coming into the season, we all know that, and they choke like they did, and they have this fall like they did, people are going to question what's wrong with Trevor Lawrence. He had a regression, not a major one, but he was not as good as last season. What's happened to the play calling?
Pharrell Coast to Coast, only on SportsGrid.
I am not a Cowboys fan. I did not have a Cowboys ticket on this game. I bet the over, but I'm frustrated watching this game. I'm frustrated seeing the Dallas Cowboys think that this is their optimal game plan.
In-game live, prime time, only on SportsGrid.
SportsGrid, the only streaming sports betting network. Tips, info, and insights to up your IQ. It's smarter to be on SportsGrid.
Welcome back to NewsWire here on SportsGrid. Jacob Camenker is with us here. He's going to be very busy over at sportingnews.com, not just with the NFL games, but this is a coaching cycle like we've never seen in the NFL. Maybe harder to predict who's going to end up getting jobs than the actual games themselves. Jacob's with us now to discuss that. And Jacob, we're off and running here. We've got Bill Belichick interviewing with the Falcons. Who would have thought that? We've got Jim Harbaugh now back in the mix, interviewing with the Chargers. And maybe there'll be some more surprises before this is all said and done.
There certainly could be. I mean, we'll all be watching the Cowboys this weekend, or this week, really, because they had that shocking exit at the hands of the Packers. Last week, I think I came on the show and said I thought the Packers would keep that game close, but that blowout has now brought into question a lot of things about Mike McCarthy's job security. So if Jerry Jones decides to move on from him, suddenly the Cowboys' job is open. Bill Belichick is out there. It's going to be an intriguing cycle. I like Belichick's fit with the Falcons a lot, but if the Cowboys' job opens up, imagine Bill Belichick in Dallas. Now, that would be a big-time story for next season.
Yeah, no, it would. Jacob, it feels like, I don't know if it feels like this to you before we dive back into the games. It feels like Arthur Blank and the Falcons are being like super proactive here in a situation to get Belichick in, not let him leave the building kind of thing. And, you never know with Dallas, to me, Jacob, because, again, it's got to be a perfect fit type situation to have that work out. But, because it didn't work out with Jimmy Johnson. But I guess in the end, when Bill Belichick makes the phone call to his mentor and there's only one guy, it's going to be Bill Parcells. And Bill Parcells, while he didn't win a Super Bowl with Dallas, he certainly had some success there and was able to work with Jerry Jones. So I don't see that being an obstacle.
Right. I agree with you. I don't think it would be an obstacle. I think Belichick generally has a good relationship from Jerry Jones, at least with what's been reported. So I think it all depends on whether or not Jones wants to stay loyal to McCarthy, who has had solid regular season success for 3 seasons, but has just come up short in the playoffs every single time. I tend to think that they might that they're probably going to move on from him, and then it just becomes, do they get Belichick or do they go in another direction? And as far as the Falcons go, I think Belichick would be a great fit there because really Atlanta is a quarterback away from having a high-quality offense, and Belichick can coach up that defense and make it a better unit. So in that weak division, that's an appealing landing spot. So I'm very interested to see where he ends up as this coaching carousel continues to spin.
Puts Belichick back in the South. I've maintained. I think that's got to be on his priority list, living in Florida for most of the year and boating and doing those things. We'll see if that ends up coming to fruition. Not going to get the Tampa Bay job. That coach won yesterday. He's sticking with the Buccaneers, Todd Bowles. Okay, so look, I mean, the prediction here for the weekend, Jacob, is non-competitive games. But that's not the way that the NFL usually works. We get surprised. So the Ravens will start off here. The Ravens are 8.5-point favorites over the Houston Texans. They come off the week of rest. Houston, very impressive against Cleveland. In fairness to Houston, Joe Flacco literally imploded in this game, and certainly gave. Let's be honest, he gave the game away to the other team. I mean, that's what happened here. But we've seen Houston play amazing with C.J. Stroud for the most part this season. Can they keep this game close? Can they upset Baltimore in Baltimore?
I don't think they pull off the upset. I'm actually thinking among the games with high spreads, this is the one that I think could really turn into a blowout. And that's nothing against the Texans and what C.J. Stroud has accomplished. They have been fantastic late in the season and winning the AFC South, feathering the cap of both Stroud and DeMeco Ryans. But the Ravens have had issues in the playoffs in the past, so they're going to be hyper-motivated for this one. They had the extra week off to prepare for this. And back in week one, they got a chance to play the Texans, and they really limited C.J. Stroud in that one. Now, I know that was his first NFL start, but at the same time, the Baltimore offense didn't play particularly well in that game. I think it was one of Lamar Jackson's worst games of the season. So if you look at that and say, all right, well, Baltimore's going to be better on offense, and you say the same thing about Houston and C.J. Stroud's going to score more than 9 points in this game, you could probably convince yourself, okay, this is going to be close. But I think the strides Baltimore has made on defense and how they match up with Houston might make this one a blowout. So if I'm going to back a blowout this week, it's probably going to be in this game.
A lot of teasers, I think, are going to be in play this week with these lines. Now we go to Saturday night, and the Packers with the most impressive win thus far in the playoffs, but the odds makers are telling us don't buy in just yet here. 9.5-point favorites, San Francisco over Green Bay. This is another scary line here, Jacob, because it's like if the Packers were as good as they looked, then how does this line, why is the line this high? And I guess the reason why is, look, San Francisco, a healthy San Francisco, blowing everybody out this year, Jacob. That's just the bottom line. Total of 50 in this game.
Yeah, I think this is a lot similar to that Eagles-Giants game we got in the playoffs last year where the Eagles were the clear-cut number one seed. The Giants won impressive fashion against the Vikings, who very few people thought they would beat, and then they got blown out by the Eagles here. Now, I think this one, the Packers actually might have a chance to cover solely because they have a good vertical passing game, and I think the weakness of this San Francisco defense is at the cornerback position. So it wouldn't surprise me if they either keep this game close or they're positioned for a late backdoor cover touchdown that Jordan Love can deliver on. So I don't think I would bet either side of this game right now. My brain is telling me I want to lean on the Packers at that number, but at the same time, as you mentioned, healthy San Francisco has dominated everyone this year, and the Packers defense still has some holes, particularly against the run. So if Christian McCaffrey has a big game, this could be a blowout. But I still like the way that the Packers are playing enough that I would consider penciling them in as my side right now. But I need more info on this game before I choose to truly back one or the other.
All right, fair enough. We go to Sunday at 3 o'clock Eastern. You and I were head-to-head last week. I really thought the Lions were going to blow out the Rams. And in the first half, I was like, all right, I got one right here on this one. And then the Lions, what happened, Jacob? They stopped playing. It was so odd in the second half of that game. I'm not really, honestly, sure what happened because it looked to me like they were unstoppable and then only stopped themselves. And so the odds makers are telling us that what we saw with Tampa Bay last night is a little bit of fool's gold because the Lions have opened up as a 6-point favorite against Tampa Bay. Did they learn their lesson, Jacob, last week? Are they going to just push the entire game, or can Tampa Bay keep this close? Some people think the Bucs could go into Detroit and win this game on Sunday. What do you say?
I don't see Tampa Bay winning this game. I think the Lions win this one. I think they could. I think that the Lions are probably the better bet to cover in a kind of a close game. Maybe they win by a touchdown or 10 points. Solely because Baker Mayfield and the Bucs offense, the best thing they do is throw the ball and throw it downfield. The weakness of the Detroit defense is in the secondary, as we saw at times trying to guard Puka Nacua. So I think Mike Evans and Chris Godwin could have a big game. But at the end of the day, the Lions could take away the run, really make Baker Mayfield beat them. And I think that that's ultimately going to sink Tampa Bay eventually. Baker Mayfield's had a great year, don't get me wrong, but we saw him take some big play sacks against the Eagles. and we know that he's a little interception prone. And I just think that the Lions offense is more of a complete unit right now because they have a really strong run game. And I know Tampa's run defense is good too, but all they need is David Montgomery and Jahmyr Gibbs to do a little, and that'll open things up for Jared Goff against that porous secondary. So I like the Lions here. I think they win by 7-10.
Okay. We've saved the game that everyone will be watching, maybe the best for last, because I don't think anybody has a clue on this one. You got to be kidding me if you have a strong opinion on here. The Bills, they're up, they're down, they're in, they're out. You have no idea who they are. The Chiefs, they haven't played well all season long. All of a sudden they play one good game and everyone's back in. But should we be? Bills, 2.5-point favorites. They're telling you these two teams are impossible to predict. Total 46.5, the final game on Sunday night, Jacob.
So I'm going to back the Chiefs reluctantly. The reason why Buffalo suffered so many injuries in that game against the Steelers, I'm just worried about how their defense is going to look. And Patrick Mahomes hasn't taken advantage of it yet, but maybe this is his time, and maybe he gets a big win in his first playoff game on the road.
Noted, Jacob. We'll look forward to talking about the championship games next week. Thanks for coming on.
You have sat down with Nick Saban for a lengthy interview. You have spoken to Nick Saban multiple times throughout his career. How surprised were you?
I mean, he's not going anywhere, I don't believe. And at the end of the day, very surprised. Athletic department surprised. Talked to a few people, Alabama folks, late last night, early this morning. Very surprised. Didn't see it coming.
The Early Line. Only on SportsGrid.
Quarterback at quarterback. We're going to lay some juice. We're going to have some dog prices, and we're going to go right in the middle.
Because I don't know what they're doing. To me, they're in a complete rebuild, Kev. Go run, run, run. That's where overbackers on this 51.5 shot.
So right now we saw a little bit more over money, but it's hovering right around.
The winner of this game will be the division
I don't care if they win because all we care about is the money, baby, the money.
Pro Football Today. It's smarter to be on SportsGrid. The Bostonian versus the Book.
This is one of the hardest jobs in all of football. You are replacing Bear Bryant. You are replacing Nick Saban. You are replacing guys who won national championships, and they still wanted him out. They still wanted him gone.
Mike Shula, you
Mike Shula was a disaster. Dubos was a disaster.
Gene Stallings.
That's what I mean. They ran him out. He won a national championship, and they ran Gene Stallings out.
The Bostonian versus the Book.
Good move by the Clippers, and obviously, folks, they have Tyronn Lue, who I think is one of the best coaches in the league. And I'll say this right now, folks, the way they're playing, I know Minnesota's in first. I know Oklahoma City's been great. I know Denver's been fantastic. But the team I'm thinking right now that could actually come out of the West, if they stay healthy, and he keeps playing like that, it's Kawhi Leonard and the Clippers.
Betting above the rim. Only on SportsGrid.
What did you think when you saw Lawrence on 3rd and 4th down, those two plays?
When you have a meltdown like the Jaguars have, the clear favorite coming into the season, we all know that, and they choke like they did, and they have this fall like they did, people are going to question what's wrong with Trevor Lawrence. He had a regression. Not a major one, but he was not as good as last season. What's happened to the play calling?
Pharrell Coast to Coast. Only on SportsGrid.
I am not a Cowboys fan. I did not have a Cowboys ticket on this game. I bet the over, but I'm frustrated watching this game. I'm frustrated seeing the Dallas Cowboys think that this is their optimal game plan.
In-game live, prime time. Only on SportsGrid.
SportsGrid, the only streaming sports betting network. Tips, info, and insights to up your IQ. It's smarter to be on SportsGrid.
Welcome Welcome back to NewsWire. Great to have Mike Mazzeo from Legal Sports Report back in our New York studios to go over the very latest in sports wagering. We'll talk some New York iGaming and also, of course, some of the indiscretions in sports betting as well. We always have these stories to bring up. Mike, great to have you back here on NewsWire. First time I've seen you in a bit. Thanks for coming on.
Greg, thanks for having me. Unfortunately, there's snow here for the first time in 2 years. It's pouring outside. Was just in Miami, as we were talking about, Fort Lauderdale as well. So missing that weather and missing that food, but glad to be back home and back here on the show.
All right. Well, let's get started here. And look, this was a story from last year about a player in the NHL. I should probably just say hockey because he really wasn't much of an impact player, but it doesn't take away from the story that a player was suspended last year for what they called, allegations of some sort of gambling issue. His name was Shane Pinto. But what was really interesting is that we really didn't get a lot of clarity as to exactly why this player was suspended or what he did. And we're starting to learn a little bit more about that now. So tell us what we've learned.
Yeah, Craig, that's the interesting part is we still don't really know. Shane Pinto finally spoke last week for the first time since he was suspended under for violating the NHL betting policy. And he basically said, I don't want to go there. It's believed there was some sort of negotiated settlement with the Players Association and the player. And so I guess we're not going to hear anything about it. Perhaps it leaks out at some point, whether that's later this year, or maybe next season, maybe 5 years from now. But yeah, given the NHL's financial partnerships with these sports books, I think it's super surprising they don't want the transparency. I think that's the big takeaway here. Pinto said, I got to be more mature. Gambling is more prevalent, obviously, in your face now as it's been legalized through over 30 states. But yeah, I was a little surprised here just at the lack of transparency. I've asked Bill Daly, the deputy commissioner, who's usually very forthcoming on multiple occasions, what happened here? What is the benefit for the league, given its financial relationships with sports books, for this to stay quiet? He won't respond. And so that's kind of where we're at, is we think there's a settlement here. We know that he was suspended for half the season, which is an incredible amount of time. He's eligible to return on January 21st. We know there's apparently suspicious activity reported on his U.S. sports betting account. Obviously, he plays for the Senators in Canada, so where was he at the time? I don't know. We don't know those details. We know there was a third party involved, and we know that he did not bet on the NHL any games, the league said. So, yeah, a lot of questions here still as this kid comes back. I mean, good for him for serving his time, and he'll play. And he's, like you said, he's maybe not the best player in the Senators, but I think he came off a 20-goal year, so pretty impactful player for them. And you hope that he stays clean and can be an example, as he said, for a lot of these players on what not to do, so nobody else gets involved in this.
Yeah, no, look, that's part of it. And again, some of these players are unfortunately going to be used in the future to make examples of. Pinto could potentially be that player. Now, yesterday we talked a little bit here, Mike, about this new iGaming bill that's coming to New York. And I guess what I didn't realize in doing some research on this is that if this ends up passing, the tax rate in New York is going to be significantly less on iGaming than it is on sports betting. So any further explanation as to why that would be? Is there less risk? What's kind of behind that idea?
Yeah, that's a great question. Because I think there can be up to 31 skins. Maybe they think, all right, we're going to have more operators, so that money pool is going to come in greater than, say, the 9 online sports betting operators they have. And again, when you go back to the sports betting thing, as this continues to be an issue, those operators agreed and negotiated to that 51%. Nobody forced them to be in New York. They wanted to be here for the market access. Obviously, it is the number one market. We'll see how Florida does, obviously, as a single operator. But for these big, commercial operators that can't operate in Florida, New York, as is currently constituted, because California and Texas aren't up, is the biggest state, biggest market for likes of FanDuel, DraftKings, MGM, Caesars. So, yeah, that's definitely, again, the 30.5%, which was in last year's bill, which didn't go anywhere. And as we're talking now, the Governor Hochul is presenting her executive budget. So we'll see, if it's even in there. I don't know if I expect it to be. I mean, a lot of industry experts say this isn't going to go anywhere. But again, continuing to get that word out. Looks like they've gotten past this hotel trades union issue. They had not supported the bill last cycle. They seem to be happy with this $25 million fund for their workers, those brick and mortar employees who may be affected by online. That's in here. There's $11 million to problem gambling, like you said, at 30.5% tax rate, 31 skins potentially for racinos, brick and mortar casinos, online sports betting operators, and 3 by a competitive bidding process. yeah, I mean, a lot to like here, but doesn't seem like it's going to move given the arduous downstate casino process where there's really no dates and we don't know when these three, finalists are even going to be decided to who gets the bids. Can this New York government operate in 2 gaming areas at one time? Doesn't seem like it's going to be the case. So this may be a 2025 issue. Obviously, we've seen the success of sports betting in New York, $862 million last year. Just the NFL betting has been at a fever pitch. People have been betting college football, basketball, baseball, all the big sports in New York, and the numbers have continued to skyrocket. But yeah, I don't know if there's going to be expansion. Perhaps the best move may be, adding award futures. That's something that could be on the table in terms of a bill, according to Joe Adabo as well, later this legislative season. So perhaps New Yorkers get more of a betting menu. But yeah, in terms of iGaming, I'd be super surprised if it moves this year. Maybe something comes up that changes that. But as of now, yeah, I'd be surprised. Kind of feels like a long shot at this point.
Yeah, and for those unfamiliar, sports betting in the state of New York, 51% tax rate, highest in the country. So, certainly another thing to follow as we move on in the year. Okay, well, state of California, they would, some people, Mike, would love that 51% tax rate. In fact, they'd love any sort of tax rate. Nothing gets pushed back in the state of California, despite the lobbying, despite the advertising. Similar to Florida's struggles over the last couple of years, California is having the same issue as far as legalizing sports betting. For those unfamiliar, California does not have legalized sports betting. I got to tell you, Mike, as we continue to hear stories about this, it seems to me, I don't know if you feel the same way, that California is going down the Florida road. I feel like the only way that California is going to have sports betting legalized is through the tribes, because otherwise it is just madness trying to get this thing pushed through.
Yeah, Craig, I completely agree with you. It's definitely going to have to come through the tribes. Casey Thompson and his group, they're trying to do a lot of good things, but there's a lot of tribal pushback from the major 3, gaming tribes, Pechanga, Morongo, and San Manuel. And as long as those 3 aren't on board, I just can't see it happening. I mean, he's gotten some smaller revenue-sharing tribes that don't have gaming, but, get to participate every year in this pool where basically every non-gaming tribe gets, I think, $1 million annually. He's trying to get them $15 million annually, which would be a huge change, and that's why those tribes are interested. But yeah, as long as those 3 big tribes are not interested, and then recently the news comes out that FanDuel, DraftKings, BetMGM, and Fanatics, the 4 members of the Sports Betting Alliance, aren't interested in this. I don't see how the major gaming operators and the major gaming tribes could be, against you in this move anywhere. But I think it does set the prospects up potentially for 2026 or maybe 2028. James Siva Morongo, who's the chairman of CNIGA, that organization that came out against this initiative. He said 2028 probably. Some of those big tribes would like to do brick and mortar first and then go to online. I don't know if that's going to be possible. Every time you lose a cycle, it makes that more difficult. So, yeah, a lot of, pockmarks in this road to legalization, but at the same time to have the big tribes and then the big sports betting operators on the same side finally, that's something that didn't happen last cycle with Prop 27 when it got handily defeated. So that's a good sign that everybody's moving in the same direction. And maybe it doesn't happen now. They're trying to gather signatures. I don't even know if they'll do that and get it on the ballot. And even so, you probably have opposition from those major operators and the tribes that say, don't vote for this. Voter confusion comes up. We saw it get 18%. I'd be shocked if it gets to 50+1, something like that it needs to move. But again, laying that groundwork for potentially that next legislative cycle, that's pretty significant and something that you hope, if you're rooting for California sports betting legislation, as many of us are, whether you're a player or somebody in the industry, that could make money on this or be able to bet finally legally and not have to use the illegal offshore operators. Something to watch here, but good that the operators, I think, and the tribes are on the same path. Those big operators and big tribes, I think that could lead somewhere, even if it is 2 to 4 years away.
Yeah, and look, that's the thing is if it happens eventually, that's certainly the most important dynamic of this. But Mike, with California, and I guess would you say Texas probably the 2 still standing out there with the most potential possibilities for revenue? But as we're learning, at least recently, Mike, Georgia seems to be a state that, look, there's really no movement yet, but it feels like that's the next push. I don't know if you would rank them 1, 2, 3, but to me it feels like Georgia 1, California 2. I don't even hear anything about Texas right now.
Yeah, Craig, I'd say Georgia definitely has a better shot. Minnesota, obviously, we know has a potential. Pat Evans is really on that. But yeah, in terms of California, I'd say we're still a cycle or 2 away. And then Texas, as long as Dan Patrick is, the head of the state Senate, and he's just doesn't want any expanded gambling. Again, maybe this Mark Cuban deal with the Adelson family with the Las Vegas Sands, that moves things there. But yeah, I mean, that's still another year away, even for Texas with alternate year legislative session. And then, yeah, California ways away. Yeah, I mean, you're pretty much hoping for, Minnesota, Georgia. You've got North Carolina coming up. We don't know what day. Hopefully around March Madness, they'll be up.
Right.
So, yeah, I mean, you got some smaller states, a little momentum, but those big states, it's just hard to see how this stuff moves unless everybody's pushing in the same direction. And, in California, at least you've got some momentum, but Texas, as long as Dan Patrick's in there at the top, it's hard to envision anything moving until his term is up. And, he'll be there in that next Texas cycle. So that's going to be hard to envision.
All right. Well, on to maybe 2025. We go with those dates. All right, Mike, great to catch up. Welcome back and enjoy the rest of your week. We'll catch up again next week here on NewsWire. Thanks for coming in the studio.
Thanks so much, Craig, as always, and have a great week yourself.
All right, Mike Mazzeo with us. LegalSportsReport.com is their website to learn a lot more about what is happening in sports betting around the country and the globe. Go to their website. They do a great job. Ben Stevens is coming up next with a preview of tonight's big game between the Nuggets and 76ers. Then Brady Kannon will join us. The American Express Tournament coming up this weekend on the PGA Tour. All the big players are in it. Who's going to win? Talk about that next.
Sat down with Nick Saban for a lengthy interview. You have spoken to Nick Saban multiple times throughout his career. How surprised were you?
I mean, he's not going anywhere, I don't believe. And at the end of the day, very surprised. Athletic department surprised. Talked to a few people, Alabama folks, late last night, early this morning. Very surprised. Didn't see it coming.
The Early Line. Only on SportsGrid.
Quarterback at quarterback. We're going to lay some juice. We're going to have some dog prices, and we're going to go right in the middle.
Because I don't know what they're doing. To me, they're in a complete rebuild, Kev. Go run, run, run. That's where overbackers on this 51.5 shot.
So right now, we saw a little bit more over money, but it's hovering right around.
The winner of this game will be the division
favorite. I don't care if they win, because all we care about is the money, baby, the money.
Pro Football Today. It's smarter to be on SportsGrid. The Bostonian versus the Book.
This is one of the hardest jobs in all of football. You are replacing Bear Bryant. You are replacing Nick Saban. You are replacing guys who won national championships, and they still wanted him out. They still wanted him gone.
Mike Shula, you
Mike Shula was a disaster. Dubos was a disaster.
Gene Stallings.
That's what I mean. They ran him out. He won a national championship, and they ran Gene Stallings out.
The Bostonian versus the Book.
Good move by the Clippers, and obviously, folks, they have Tyronn Lue, who I think is one of the best coaches in the league. And I'll say this right now, folks, the way they're playing, I know Minnesota's in first. I know Oklahoma City's been great. I know Denver's been fantastic. But the team I'm thinking right now that could actually come out of the West, if they stay healthy, and he keeps playing like that, it's Kawhi Leonard and the Clippers.
Betting above the rim, only on SportsGrid.
What did you think when you saw Lawrence on 3rd and 4th down, those two plays?
When you have a meltdown like the Jaguars have, the clear favorite coming into the season, we all know that, and they choke like they did, and they have this fall like they did, people are going to question what's wrong with Trevor Lawrence. He had a regression. Not a major one, but he was not as good as last season. What's happened to the play calling?
Pharrell Coast to Coast, only on SportsGrid.
I am not a Cowboys fan. I did not have a Cowboys ticket on this game. I bet the over, but I'm frustrated watching this game. I'm frustrated seeing the Dallas Cowboys think that this is their optimal game plan.
In-game live, prime time, only on SportsGrid.
SportsGrid, the only streaming sports betting network. Tips, info, and insights to up your IQ. It's smarter to be on SportsGrid.
Welcome back to NewsWire here on SportsGrid. The National Basketball Association, of course, on a Tuesday night, has got some marquee games being played. No question, Thunder's Clippers, one of them. Both teams playing great basketball, as well as over in the East, the 76ers are hosting the Denver Nuggets. Let's get a preview of both games with Ben Stevens.
Craig, as football season draws to a close, still 3 more rounds of the NFL playoffs, including the Super Bowl. That's 7 NFL games remaining this year. Our attention might turn a little bit more to basketball. And around the association, you might just be getting familiar with this year in the NBA, but we're already near the midway point for most teams around the association in this 82-game regular season, including, Craig, for a team that plays tonight. A short 3-game slate on this Tuesday, but a marquee matchup in Philadelphia with the defending NBA champion Denver Nuggets, who, Craig, sit this year at 28-13, third best winning percentage in the Western Conference. 28-13, that's 41 games. Denver has already reached its midway point of its 2023-24 NBA regular season, past the midway point after tonight's marquee matchup in Philadelphia. It's an MVP showdown between Joel Embiid and Nikola Jokic, a 4-point spread in favor of the 76ers, who this year, Craig, as a favorite, one of the best in the NBA, 21-8 against the number. Denver has often been a favorite. This game here with the plus, not something the Nugs are accustomed to. Just the 4th time in this NBA campaign, Denver will be booked as an underdog. They have not been booked as the underdog side since the early portion of December. So far this year, both 1 and 2 straight up and against the spread as an underdog. At this moment, Nikola Jokic, who was last year's NBA Finals MVP, the 2 regular seasons prior, he went back-to-back winning the MVP award around the association, is that front runner the favorite to win the most valuable player at plus 170. For a good majority of the early going of this year, Joel Embiid was also a front runner and favorite for that MVP award, but now the 5th best price, Craig, at 8-1. Joel Embiid has already missed double-digit games this year, and with the new minimum games played being one of those stipulations to be considered for NBA awards, it might be hurting JoJo's MVP case. It was his first game yesterday, Craig, for Philadelphia since January 5th, and Joel Embiid returned with a 41-point performance. Points prop tonight, 32.5. Nikola Jokic, technically listed as questionable, but does have a points prop available, 26. And now we go late night in Los Angeles. For the 2nd consecutive night, Oklahoma City remains in LA. Yesterday, losing as the slight road favorite against LeBron James, Anthony Davis, and the Lakers by 7, 112-105. Second leg of a road back-to-back. OKC now sees themselves as an underdog. 9-4-1 against the spread this year for the Thunder as a dog. 8 of those 9 covers, Craig, an outright victory. Now going up against the other Los Angeles team, Kawhi Leonard and the Clippers. Craig, 8-10, the mark for the Clips at the end of November. From that point, 2 games below 500, LA has won 17 of their last 21. And as the favored side this year, Craig, 19-13 against the spread. Good as a favorite, laying 5 tonight against Oklahoma City. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, if he plays on the second leg of a back-to-back for OKC, second best price to win that MVP award, only behind Nikola Jokic. Again, the Joker at plus 170, SGA at plus 280. A short slate, but a marquee slate, Craig, tonight around the association.
All right, thanks very much, Ben. We'll check back with Ben tomorrow. Now we check in with Brady Kannon, who's got a big golf tournament to preview coming up this weekend. The prep season is over on the PGA Tour, Brady. Before long, we'll be talking about the Masters and the Open and everything else. But this is a nice tournament this weekend with a major field and major money, by the way, at stake in Southern California. Thanks for coming on the show.
Yeah, you bet. Good to be with you as always, Craig. And you mentioned kind of the prep, the preseason. This is the final golf tournament for me where I just kind of dumb down the risk. And it's a bit of a preseason for me here. The 2 tournaments in Hawaii and then the American Express this weekend in La Quinta, California. And then I ramp up and kind of, expand the bets as far as getting into some finishing position bets and head-to-head matchups next week when they hit Torrey Pines. But you're right, a really good field this week. Jason Day, Ricky Fowler, Tony Finau, world number 1, Scotty Scheffler, Xander Schauffele, Patrick Cantlay. It's a really tough tournament to handicap. I think it's always been one of the more difficult ones for me. You tend to get very random winners out here. Hudson Swafford and Adam Long. Speaking of Adam Hadwin is a guy that I landed on. He's maybe got the best course history here of anybody in the field. He's finished third, he's finished sixth, he's finished runner-up twice. He's done well at other desert courses, like right here in Las Vegas at TPC Summerlin, also TPC Scottsdale. So Hadwin was a guy I landed on at 50-1. Sunjay M, who comes off of a fifth place finish at the Sentry in Kapalua, then took last week off. So he should come in well rested and fresh. He does nothing but finish top 15 here. He's finished 10th, 12th, 11th, 10th. I mean, it's what he seems to do year in and year out in 5 different trips to this golf course. He's another one of the finest players in this field. I got him at 21-1. I took a shot with Eric Cole, the PGA Tour Rookie of the Year. Got him at 35-1. He comes off of 2 nice finishes in Hawaii, a 14th place and a 13th place. And the guy can really make birdies. That's what you need here. This is another tournament that is a birdie fest. You know, your winner is going to be in the neighborhood of 25, 28 under, something like that. So having a good putter and a guy that can make a lot of birdies is probably what you want to have on your card this week. And then I went a little further down the board to a guy that really was on fire at the end of last year. Cam Davis finished top 10 in 5 out of his last 7 events to finish off 2023. Had a couple of good rounds in Hawaii, started off the Sony with a 62 and heavy wind. So it shows me that the form is still there. Got him at 70-1. I think this guy's going to win probably at least once, if not twice this season. And it could come here this week. And then Bo Hostler at 80-1. Again, finished off last year really hot, a lot of top 10 finishes, very good putter, makes a lot of birdies. And then my longest bomb, if we're going to stay with the theme of triple-digit winners, you know, that's what we've had to kick off the season so far in Chris Kirk and Grayson Murray. I've got Eric Van Rooyen at 105-1. He just won a little over a month and a half ago or so in November. He finished 6th here last year at the American Express, another guy that makes a lot of birdies. If there's one common theme with all my guys, Craig, they're pretty darn good putters and they make a lot of birdies. So we'll see if we can get one of them to have a hot putter this week and find their way to the winner's circle.
It's happened the last couple of weeks on the tour. Surprises with Murray winning in overtime as well. So we'll see what happens this week. It should be fun. Now, let's pivot over to the National Football League games. We'll start off with Saturday, Brady. And look, we're getting some big spreads this week, so I don't know what that's really telling us. Maybe the books have to protect a little bit after what happened in wildcard weekend last week. The Baltimore Ravens are well rested. They're taking on a Houston Texans team. It's basically had 2 seasons, Brady. They've had the C.J. Stroud season, and then when he's not playing season. And when he's playing, they play very well. And when he's not, they get annihilated. So assuming he's playing, which of course he will be because he played last week too, do the Texans have a chance here to keep things close or even pull off what would be the biggest upset of the season in Baltimore?
I do think they have a chance to do both. You know, I made the number just off of my power ratings, 6.5 in favor of Baltimore. And that's a pretty big difference. And we have seen some movement in the market. It's still generally 9.5 out there, but I've seen a 9 and I've seen a couple 8.5. So, you know, maybe it is ticking down. And you're exactly right. I think there's no bigger difference for any team in the NFL, it seems, this season that we've seen anyway, when CJ Stroud is in the lineup versus when he's out of the lineup. Now, I think this game, saying that, I think this game comes down to the defense of the Houston Texans. If they can hold Baltimore in check and not let this game get away from them, then, you know, I think they have a chance to not only cover, but possibly pull off a huge upset. And their defense looked really good last week, but, you know, that's a totally different offense, the Cleveland Browns offense on the road versus the Baltimore Ravens offense at home. So, you know, I think there are a lot of possibilities for the Texans here, especially if their defense can show up and play very well. But right now, you know, I would take the 9.5, and I'd love to be able to get 10. But I think this game will be closer. I think Baltimore probably wins. You know, obviously they're one of the best teams in the NFL, if not the very best. They're favored by 9.5 for a reason. I think it'll be closer than that, but Baltimore likely advances.
All right, so there you go. Baltimore gets in. We don't really get that big teaser number there for the Ravens this week. And that teaser number for the Cowboys didn't matter at all last week, Brady, because they got beat down outright. But what's the reward for the Packers for pulling off the upset of the season? It's, being 10-point underdogs again this week at San Francisco. Boy, the odds makers are telling us don't believe in what we saw last week in Dallas, which is sort of shocking, but you probably would say that the 49ers are the best team in the NFL. And generally speaking, when they've won, they pretty much have blown out most of their opponents. Are the Packers in that category of blowout material this week, or is there another upset in store?
I think the Packers could get blown out for sure. It's been kind of interesting what the 49ers have been doing the past few weeks. I think they've been a little bit on cruise control. Their defense hasn't been as sharp. Their offense hasn't even been as sharp. You know, they kind of knew that they were just about to the finish line, and it seems like they just kind of coasted. Whereas the Green Bay Packers, their numbers have become very elevated because their offense has found a new gear, and they've been pushing to make this postseason tournament. But you make a couple of great points there in the intro. You know, this line with 9.5 on the Ravens and 10 with the 49ers. I do believe there is some thought into those lines where the books are protecting against teasers. You know, if the Ravens come down to 8.5, that makes them a prime candidate for teasers. I will probably be using the San Francisco 49ers in a 10-point teaser, but, you know, another reason that the books probably don't want to come down to 8.5 in this one as well, because then San Francisco could possibly become a very big teaser liability. The other thing to think about is I think the general public will tend to react to what they saw last week, and what they saw last week was some underdogs pulling off the upset. They saw the Texans rout the Cleveland Browns. They saw the Tampa Bay Buccaneers hammer the Philadelphia Eagles, and of course the Green Bay Packers shocking the Dallas Cowboys. So, you know, they may be wanting to run to the window that, you know, Tampa Bay is going to keep it close with Detroit, you know, and that's the other thing. The Detroit, you know, barely escapes with a 1-point win over the Rams. So Tampa Bay is probably going to be getting some love over Detroit. Green Bay is probably going to get some love against the San Francisco 49ers. And the Texans may get a little love against the Ravens. But I think you have to guard against that, because these teams that all pulled off the upset in the wild card round, they're now stepping up in class in a big way. So, you know, I wouldn't be surprised. 10 points is a lot. I wouldn't be surprised if Green Bay covered with the way their offense has been, firing on all cylinders as of late. But again, like the Ravens game, the Niners are the much better team, and I think they find themselves in the NFC Championship after this week.
Yeah, people seem to forget that there's a reason why they're the number one seed in Green Bay and Baltimore. Historically speaking, second round is tougher. Thanks, Brady, for coming on.
You got it, buddy.
You have sat down with Nick Saban for a lengthy interview. You have spoken to Nick Saban multiple times throughout his career. How surprised were you?
I mean, he's not going anywhere, I don't believe. And at the end of the day, very surprised. Athletic department surprised. Talked to a few people, Alabama folks, late last night, early this morning. Very surprised. Didn't see it coming.
The Early Line. Only on SportsGrid.
Quarterback at quarterback. We're going to lay some juice. We're going to have some dog prices, and we're going to go right in the middle.
Because I don't know what they're doing. To me, they're in a complete rebuild, Kev. Go run, run, run. That's where overbackers on this 51.5 shot.
So right now, he's a little bit more over money, but it's hovering right around.
The winner of this game will be the division favorite.
I don't care if they win, because all we care about is the money, baby, the money.
Pro Football Today. It's smarter to be on SportsGrid. The Bostonian versus the book.
This is one of the hardest jobs in all of football. You are replacing Bear Bryant. You are replacing Nick Saban. You are replacing guys who won national championships, and they still wanted him out. They still wanted him gone.
Mike Shula, you're replacing
was
him?
a disaster. Dubos was a disaster.
Gene Stallings.
That's what I mean. They ran him out. He won a national championship, and they ran Gene Stallings out.
The Bostonian versus the Book.
Good move by the Clippers, and obviously, folks, they have Tyronn Lue, who I think is one of the best coaches in the league. And I'll say this right now, folks, the way they're playing, I know Minnesota's in first. I know Oklahoma City's been great. I know Denver's been fantastic. But the team I'm thinking right now that could actually come out of the West, if they stay healthy, and he keeps playing like that, it's Kawhi Leonard and the Clippers.
Betting above the rim, only on SportsGrid.
What did you think when you saw Lawrence on 3rd and 4th down, those 2 plays?
When you have a meltdown like the Jaguars have, the clear favorite coming into the season, we all know that, and they choke like they did, and they have this fall like they did, people are going to question what's wrong with Trevor Lawrence. He had a regression this season. Not a major one, but he was not as good as last season. What's happened to the play calling?
Pharrell Coast to Coast, only on SportsGrid.
I am not a Cowboys fan. I did not have a Cowboys ticket on this game. I bet the over, but I'm frustrated watching this game. I'm frustrated seeing the Dallas Cowboys think that this is their optimal game plan.
In-game live, prime time, only on SportsGrid.
SportsGrid, the only streaming sports betting network. Tips, info, and insights to up your IQ. It's smarter to be on SportsGrid.
Welcome back to NewsWire. One of the things that I try to remember to do every day is exercise and make sure to eat healthy and play Immaculate Grid. They don't go hand in hand at all. But anyway, not sure if you guys or girls know what this is, but Immaculate Grid is a game that you could play online every day. And basically, it's like baseball trivia, essentially. You have to figure it out. You can see this is my score from yesterday. I'm not here to pound my chest after my score yesterday, which was really good. But I am here to tell you that what has happened with me with this game is because I'm pretty good at it, generally speaking, that when I get one wrong, I just quit. I don't know. Is that bad that I just am done? And I always try to play this game with the vision of trying to get a really good score. I'm not interested in just finishing it and getting the night. I think most people play just to finish it. But I suppose because of my knowledge of baseball going back 40 or so years, and probably further than that, but being really entrenched in it, that if my score is going to be in the hundreds, I'm I really don't care. So I don't know what it says about me that I'm quitting games now later in life, but I guess it tells you that if I don't do awesome, I'm just not interested in playing. I don't know if that goes for everything, but it definitely goes for that game, Immaculate Grid. Sorry to be on the soapbox today. Figured I'd end the show that way. All right, that will do it for our program today. Mike Mazzeo was with us from Legal Sports Report, also Brady Kannon, in addition to Jacob Camenker from Sporting News, our producer today, Sam Yarnell. I'm Craig Mish. Again, this is NewsWire. We're on every day, 11 a.m. to 12 p.m. Eastern, right here on our SportsGrid network. Now, coming up next, we've got the early line, and that's followed by Coast to Coast. So make sure you stay tuned for all of those shows because plenty of things besides just the National Football League are alive and kicking right now. We've got college basketball. We've got the NBA. We've got the NHL. So all kinds of picks and information and entertainment on sports wagering is headed your way the rest of the day. I hope you're there for it. I'll see you tomorrow morning at 11 a.m. Eastern for our next edition of NewsWire. Until then, have a great day, everyone.